Great. All right. So, and so what I'm going to do is, this is meant to be very quick to help ground us in the apportionment process. Apportion who? Apportionment. So this is a process of determining how many county commissioners we will have and the boundaries of those districts for the next decade, actually. So this happens every 10 years with the census. And the commission is a 5-person panel, which includes Larry Kestenbaum, who is the chairperson of this commission. He's also the county clerk. Catherine McClary, who is the county treasurer. Ellie Savitt, who is the Washtenaw County prosecuting attorney. David Fry, who is the vice chairperson of the commission, and he is the Washtenaw County Republican Party chair, and Chris Savage, who is the Washtenaw County Democratic Party chair. The group that's going to be doing this presentation for you today is myself. I'm Desiree Simmons. I am one of the co-directors with Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice, or ICPJ. We have Margaret Shankler and Dirk Mayhew, who are also joining us. And we really kind of came together. We started in conversations out of the Vote Caucus, which is voters organizing through engagement. And then we've kind of taken it further and kind of continued to research and are coming up with this. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Margaret.
Okay, so I'm sure that at least some of us on this call are new to the whole concept of what the county commission is. And this budget that nobody knows about. It's $133 million in 2020, not including money that's coming to the county from the American Rescue Plan, which will be $70 million when it's all done. And to quote, we think it's Biden that originated this, but don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. So why we got involved in the apportionment and in figuring out what the county commission does is because they make huge decisions that impact all of our lives. Okay, so what does the county fund with this $133 million? Well, public transportation, public safety, and the sheriff, which up until COVID was the bulk of the money. It was 77 million or something like that. Clerk, Register of Deeds, jails, courts, and trial services, the prosecutor's office. So for example, if we wanted to add a conviction integrity unit or more public facing things to the prosecutor's office, it's the county commission that decides whether that gets funded or not. Wraparound services, community mental health. There was a millage recently for that. And interestingly, on the east side, it's going to community mental health. On the west side, it's going to streets and things like that. Elections, which are really important. Again, the county clerk, veteran services, food nutrition programs, health clinics, and county parks. So that's a lot. They do a lot. If you had asked me a few years ago if there was a body that handled all these things, I would not be able to tell you that. Currently, there are 9 commission districts, and these were set in around 2011 after the 2010 census, and they went down from 11 districts to 9. There were political reasons, I suppose, and a bunch of other reasons that Dirk will get into as to why somebody might prefer, 9 districts over 11 or even more districts, which some of us who are advocating on this believe that there needs to be even more than 11. Desiree is going to talk a little bit about, let's see, do we want to go to the maps? This is the next slide. But
yeah, I could go and then we can just jump into the, yeah. So as we get ready to look at the maps, I just wanted to share like a couple of things that we thought about as we were looking at them and kind of drawing them up. One is that as we've been having conversations with community members and some of the different decision makers, we have determined that we need more commissioners in order to address the racial and economic disparities in the county better. And so one of the things is that we need more representation on the east side of the county. And also to think about why there might be a need to more separate the city of Ypsilanti from Ypsilanti Township. So one of the things that I look at is, for instance, the economic differences. So the median income in the city of Ypsilanti in 2019 for an individual is $20,820, whereas in the township in 2019 for an individual, the median income was $46,460. And so that alone shows a difference in terms of what those communities might need in terms of resources. And then we want to also build stronger democratic practices that empower the community. And so with the current 9 commissioners, they each represent about over 40,000 people each. So bringing that number down could actually help with more communication and interaction between elected officials and their constituents, especially for constituents that need more in-person contact. These could be lower information voters, these can be the elderly, people who are not already plugged into this process that might need more support to actually know what's going on. And also to remember that the county commissioners are only part-time here in this county too. And so having fewer constituents could actually give them, maybe actually give them more time to do that. They are responsible for doing so much communication out to the community. And so that's one of the things that we were looking at as well, while also wanting to keep communities together. So one of the things, like for instance, West Willow in the current map is split as a neighborhood. And we believe that neighborhood should be fully within one district because that will make it easier for them to be able to engage as a neighborhood. The other thing is to not overprivilege Ann Arbor. So most of the maps that we'll show will start with looking at the east side first, as opposed to starting inside of Ann Arbor's city boundaries. So other communities, if we start in Ann Arbor, other communities will need to be split because we're overprivileging Ann Arbor. They have 1/3 of the population, and so they will have representation no matter what. And we should also note that in some of the maps, or most of the maps, you'll see a downtown district in Ann Arbor, which is different from the way it's split now, which could actually better match the residents who live in kind of similar living accommodations than the current map does. But yes, we want to start in a different place than starting in Ann Arbor. And then also to note too that, again, these maps are going to be for the next 10 years. And so we need to be thinking about the kind of crises that we might encounter over the next 10 years as well. And really believe that we need more leaders to help deal with these crises that might be coming. And also recognizing that people might start off in a county and move to different directions. So just for us to know, our U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow started in the county commission. And here in Washtenaw County, our state rep, Jeff Irwin, started in the county commission, as well as some local Michigan reps with Robbie, Brayback, and Peterson. They all also started in the commission. And so also recognizing that wanting more hands on on deck to do the work, and also that people do wind up running for other offices out of the county commission too. So with that, I think we can jump into the maps. Maybe we can just, so we'll start off, we have a few different ones just to show you that we can kind of look into with different numbers. There's a lot of different configurations, I'll just say, of how these maps can look. Even if we decide on a number, the boundaries can look different. There's a couple of things that the commission has to kind of abide by. But so these are just examples that we pulled. Dirk pulled a lot of maps together for us. He was like, just tell me what to do and I'll figure some stuff out. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dirk to kind of go through. These are some of the faves that we pulled out, and we can spend more time. We can go back to some of them that you might like. But let's start off with the one that is currently my favorite of 13. So Dirk, I'll give you the floor to kind of talk a little bit about the maps.
My favorite too does, and one of the big things that this does. Well, first you're looking at the county. There's a few cities kind of splorched in the middle of a bunch of square townships, and that's really typical of Michigan. All across the state, people are going through the same thing. There's some rules about combining cities with townships, and that's a big challenge in Ann Arbor. But the last time when we set this up, and we cut seats from 11 to 9. One of the things that happened was Barton Hills fell into the same district that runs right up to the edge of Sycamore Meadows. And when the districts are really big like that, when they're stretching across a quarter of the county, like you can see, even with more districts, there's 13 shown here, which is a lot more than the 9 we have right now. Even so, to make up the same number of people in each district, which is the rule, District 11 down in the bottom left there has to be really big because there's so few people living out in that part of the county. With big districts, though, you're almost guaranteed you're going to be mixing together some very different communities, folks that their kids don't go to the same schools, they don't know each other, they've got very little in common. Quite literally, there's a little bump out just under the word Superior. That's Sycamore Meadows, and the district today stretches all the way around Ann Arbor and touches Barton Hills. Way too big. And the same thing happens in Augusta into Ypsi Township in the current map. There's $2 million houses and 80-acre estates in Augusta Township. That same district also contains the bottom half of West Willow because West Willow is split by one of these district lines. So the idea of getting smaller districts and more districts is the same thing. If the districts are going to be smaller, then there has to be more of them. But there's a few rules you do have to follow. We don't necessarily need to get into the details of how do you make up the numbers. It comes out of the census. The apportionment committee will work on census blocks, which is a little different than municipalities or precincts or some of the other stuff you might be familiar with. I'm very fond of this map. I put a lot of work into it. If you notice, there's 4 districts in Ann Arbor, and it's got that downtown District 1 that you mentioned already. And there's kind of 2 and a part in the Ypsies. There's a district and maybe a half between District 7 and District 13. The numbers are arbitrary, but it doesn't matter what the numbers. But there's 2 of those plus Ypsi City is split up. So you've almost got equity between the population in that our largest township and the population of Ann Arbor, which right now I'm not sure that you actually do. Plus, combining the city with the township is a little weird. They had to do it for numbers. But in this case, they're split up. One of the big things about this, though, there's no magic number of districts, and there's no one best way to divide up the county. Somebody's going to have to make some hard decisions. And once you decide, for example, how many districts or how big they're supposed to be, you've already decided, whether you know it or not, you've already decided which communities have to be split up, where the risk is going to go. That challenge gets easier as the districts get smaller. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions about this or what we're looking at or the process or anything?
There's a question in the chat about whether we've submitted these maps yet.
I've submitted this very, thanks Thank you for the compliment. I submitted this very map. Yeah, I'm pretty fond of it. And it was after a lot of attempts, because you can slide the districts around, you can make them L-shaped or C-shaped or whatever, right? And there's different combinations. There's a lot of different ways to do it. This is kind of where I ended up.
There's a comment in the chat from Marty. Splitting a city to share with others is disempowering. Let IPSI be whole. I think that this map actually make. I can't hear you.
Oh, I was waiting for you, sorry. So today, maybe if you scroll back up, Margaret or whoever's on the screen, if you look at the 9-district map, you'll see that the city of Ypsilanti is combined with the northern part of Ypsilanti Township. It's District 6 there. That contains, I don't know, half of the population of the county, of the township.
Sorry.
It also contains the city of Ypsilanti, which is kind of a no-no, but they had to do it because you got to make up equal numbers. The map we were just looking at, if you look at District 6 here, the yellow district, the map we were just looking at actually separates out the city from the township. The city has its own district, plus a few more census blocks in order to make up the numbers, because everybody's got to have about the same number of people living in their district. And that's what District 6, which is basically the city of Ypsilanti, and District 7, which is kind of the east side of the township of Ypsilanti does. Again, there's a lot of ways to do this. And if you have any suggestions, same offer to you as I made to Margaret and Des. None of us are experts. If you've got a way to look at it, you get some information, I'm more than happy to make a map that tries to do that. So that answers the question. This particular map splits out Ypsi City from Ypsi Township. Tries to.
There's a question in the chat from Rita. Rita, do you want to answer your ask your question, or do you want me to Okay,
exactly, Marty. That's exactly what happened. The name Ypsilanti was blocked out.
Rita says one of the commissioners talked about inequities in the west side of the county. Do you have any idea what she was referring to? When was this, Rita?
It was on Saturday when We Rock hosted 2 of the commissioners at a meeting.
Okay, and so it was Carolyn who said that.
Yeah,
there's an.
On the west side of the county, Carolyn Sanders is in.
There's poverty on the west side. I mean,
yep. Poverty everywhere.
Well, and my point is, has anybody looked at, drilled down into where there might be issues there?
Yeah.
So,
I
because
did.
we're so focused on the east side, but is anybody looking at the west side? That's all. Because they do, it's so rural that they just really get lumped in.
It's unfortunately, to make up the numbers, yeah, you're going to get big districts on the west side because the population density is so low. And there's no way around that without disenfranchising somebody. And fun fact, it used to be that the county commission was 1 person per municipality. Ann Arbor got 1 with 100,000 people in it. Freedom Township got 1 with 1,000 people in it. So Supreme Court said that was a no-no, and that's how you end up with these districts. There's such big difference in size. I did look at the rural broadband issue, which is pretty popular for us to worry about in Ann Arbor. I looked at some stuff to do with sewer, with power lines, transportation needs. But at the end of the day, on the rural western part of the county, this picture kind of tells the story, and they all have the same challenge. In order to make up the numbers, the districts are big, and they get bigger if there's fewer of them. So to really focus on communities like Linden Township, they don't have a rural broadband problem. Somebody paid for it, and they've got it. Scioto Township, they've got half of the Gilman Plume. Ann Arbor's got the other half. But because these districts are very large, right, those concerns that might be specific to one township, they have to get grouped together with other townships, other communities.
Build a line.
So really,
and can I just
districts.
I also just want to add here too is that while looking at some of these other areas, I saw Joan put in like some of the different things, for instance, in some of the different townships in terms of transportation, lack of public transportation access, broadband, and things of that sort. That, when we're thinking about racial and economic disparities, and ones that have been historic and longstanding and really institutional, that there might be some variation in terms of what that looks like, right? So there might be things that, for instance, in the city of Ypsilanti, we do have public transportation, although as a person who doesn't drive and only takes public transportation, I would say our public transportation is designed to help to get people from Ypsilanti to go into Ann Arbor to work and back, and not necessarily for me to be able to get from one side of Ypsilanti to the other, right? So public transportation always has a for who kind of question to it. But while so we do have that infrastructure, and other parts of the county don't have that infrastructure, that some of the different disparities are still in terms of things like life expectancy, like those are the kind of things that, and thinking about what would be termed social determinants of health, and thinking about those, that would be what I would lift up in terms of what kind of things that need to be addressed that are not being addressed. And with broadband, what we see now is that with American Rescue Plan money, that is being addressed, but there are still going to be access issues for internet that are not going to be addressed in the city of Ypsilanti. As example, and the city of Ypsilanti and their residents have been heavily impacted by COVID-19 and are still waiting to see those funds come into the community directly. So that's the kind of thing too, I think is important to lift up, is that there are a lot of different variety. And with this map that we're looking at, one of the things I liked about it is that it did help to bring the size of some of these rural areas to much smaller area size, which means that the commissioners might be more able to be actually engaged across that space, even though it's going to cross over some different community kind of boundaries or lines.
It's really tough.
And something to add to just the whole idea of East Side, West Side, and you know, there's the concept of equal and then the concept of equity, and what equity means to those of us who are trying to see if the county can't be configured differently is, are the resources going where they're most needed, and on a population and a per person spending basis. And because I think it's a goal of the county. There's a county equity office now. There's an equity officer. Every proposal is supposed to go through that office to determine if it creates equity. And equity means lifting up people who, you know, are under-resourced, or areas that are under-resourced. It doesn't mean, you know, applying something equally. If Ann Arbor gets something, then, you know, Ypsilanti gets something. That's actually the way it's been in that. And that's what happened with the mental health millage, was that Ann Arbor didn't want it because they have their own policing. And so they're using it for bike lanes, right? So it's you know, so there's no equity there, because when will Ypsilanti ever be able to catch up to use money as extra for bike lanes? I know I digress, but there was one other thing about, oh yes, just historically, the way that it has been is that when Desiree says, you know, stop focusing on Ann Arbor, or is that that Ann Arbor is always the center. Whatever happens to Ann Arbor is most important because the population is densest. In 2011, Scioto Township had to be split up a bunch because to make numbers equal. And so there was, so the big movement then was, it's so unfair to Scioto Township. It's so unfair to some of these Western communities. And so how they balanced it was they split up Ypsilanti. So, you know, it's a complicated discussion, and there's a lot of factors, but I hope that we can center it on, you know, real equity, as opposed to, you know, this town, you know, everybody needs to get some benefit.
And I know, so we're going to look at another map. The next one, just to say too, so in these conversations, so as you see, we're advocating for like 13 or more, really, as you'll see. But before we had 9, we had 11. And so some folks seem like, oh, maybe 11 will be good to go back to because it's an increase, but it's not a big increase. And so Dirk, if you want to show them, so we kind of did a map of 11 to see if we could still achieve some of our goals at 11, and see what that would look like.
So these aren't labeled. Can you tell me which is which?
So yeah, this one is the 11.
Okay.
So what I was trying to get at here again to try to, and you can see a little bit better with the color coding, split out Ypsi City from Ypsi Township. And it's my view, and you know, I'm just one person, random dude from Ann Arbor, but it's my view that the split that ran through West Willow, which was put there by former prosecutor Brian Mackey, it's probably not good for communities, and it had some weird side effects, like it influenced the poll locations. Again, though, like Margaret said, once you decide how big the districts are, or if you want how many districts there's going to be, a bunch of decisions get made for you. When we picked 9, Pittsfield had to be a little bit into Ypsi Township because it wasn't quite big enough to be its own district. And you can see on this one, in order to give Pittsfield Township mostly its fair share in an 11-seat map, you're going to have to give up some room to make space for a Ypsi Township and Augusta numeric balance, and then take away some space from Saline City. And those decisions, they're constrained by the geography, where the people are, and the number of districts that you pick. It's all a trade-off. I will say this, there's 11 seats in the room. It was built for 11 commissioners, so it should be relatively easy to get back to 11. And we didn't mention this, I don't think, but before 11, there was 15. So, and that was Brian Mackey again. He's been cutting seats for the last 20 years. But at this point, we have literally half the representation that we did 20 years ago, literally, because the county population went up and the number of seats just rocketed downwards. So the commissioners are quite literally covering double the number of people they used to. They don't know that, they're all too young, but that's what happened. I'm very committed, me personally, and interested in getting a downtown Ann Arbor district. These maps are set up on precincts. It's a little weird looking, but that's what that red blotch is about. And then you can see the rural districts, the northeast, northwest, southwest. They just have to be big. There's no way around it. Interesting side note, City of Milan is split across the county line. So these areas, you can't split things. Every rule is negotiable. I tried to combine a little bit of Ann Arbor with the Ann Arbor Township in order to make numbers on this.
You want me to go to the bigger map? Oops.
We're going to run out of time, so whatever.
Okay.
We're going to get to
so
this. 15 minutes.
How many? This one's 15, is it? No, or 14.
So maybe we could just say, so one of the things is that, I mean, a lot of the maps that we're looking at are odd numbers because that's what it has been. It doesn't have to be an odd number. It can be an even number. And so the one that is next was the 14 map. And then the last one is the 15. So I don't know if there's one that you want to talk about more, but then we can go into just prepping for the meeting.
The key to me is that you're going to move the splits around. So you can see some, the districts are kind of moving and flowing, and you got to chop up different communities in order to make the numbers equal between everything. And it's kind of buried in the math. Once you decide how big the districts are, you've almost already decided which communities are going to take the hit. With 9 districts like we have now, it's Ypsi Township. Ann Arbor divides neatly into 3, but Ypsi Township is half that size. So you get like 1.5 in Ypsi Township, right? There's a divide by 2 thing there. And that's the key. The size of the district, the number of districts are connected, but which community takes the heat in the shell game of trying to get the numbers right, that's decided by those things. The population's fixed. The number of districts pretty much decides which community is going to be chopped up. That problem gets easier if the districts are smaller. Lots of things get better if we get more representation, smaller districts, more districts. So that'd be my key. there's a few goals I think that people should probably align on. And I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm really not. But the idea that Ipsy City and Ipsy Township are different, that's a point of discussion, and people can have their different points of view. The idea that a township, communities of interest should stay together, and what that means for West Willow, for maybe Sycamore Meadows and the east side of the county, that's a conversation that needs to be brought to the front. And most important, I think, that concept does that you hit, that Ann Arbor shouldn't dominate it. When you pick Ann Arbor as the basis of your district count or size, you've automatically disadvantaged other communities. It's just math. It's not personal. But picking Ann Arbor every time to set up the map systematically disadvantages other communities. That should be open for conversation. And that's the point I'm going to try to make to Larry tonight. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And we can go to the last slide. And if we have time to go back to any other things. So just as we're getting ready, so the meeting starts at 6:30. And so this is the link to the site where you can join that meeting. Just so you know, the public comment time is up to 5 minutes. And so you can share that. And then you also can send an email, and some of you might have already seen there's a form where you can submit information afterwards, and you can also upload maps. And so I'll just say that if you're interested in any of these maps that we have that you'd like, you can let us know so we can share it with you, so that you can go ahead and upload too. I think the more that they see some of them, then that's also good. They have been primarily, just so if you haven't been to any of these meetings yet, the public hearings are different from their general meetings. And so the public hearings, they have primarily been just kind of listening as public comment comes in, which is you'll have to raise your hand to speak and all of that. But they've been mainly listening, and then maybe one or two of them will comment on the speaker as they've been going, or lifting up points. And then once the comments are done, they've basically closed up the meeting and just said like what's coming up next. This might be a little bit different because this is the last public hearing, but I do want to note that they will have more meetings of the commission. The meetings of the commission are public as well. And so once those are released, we'll be sharing those out with folks as well. And they do have public comment as part of those meetings too. So this isn't the last opportunity to talk with them or share information, but it is the last public hearing, and they will be starting to make, I think, decisions based on what they're getting up to this point. And so that's why we're trying to get folks to go to that. The last one's also, just so you know, they have invited everyone up as panelists in the previous one, so you might note that. And I think just as we're sharing, if there are different notes, I mean, whether it's anybody on this call or on the general one, that I also think that there's power in lifting up points from others or building off of one another as well, that they kind of can see how the community is kind of seeing and engaging in these, and like what points are most important. Larry kind of said at the beginning, he was like, don't come up and repeat yourself, but I push against that. I think if there's something that's important, that we should repeat it, because we want them to hear it enough times that they recognize that it's more representative than one voice. So just ignore that. And if there's something that's important, then you should repeat it. So that's my encouragement for each of you. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else there's to expect from this hearing. Anything else that we should share with folks before they jump, or we see if there's any other questions?
Totally chill. This is the most chill group of electeds I've ever talked to. They promote you to panelists, they back and forth, and they actually ask your opinion. Really easy to get along with, and hardly anybody shows up. Your influence in this is huge.
I put the link to the meeting in the chat, so if anyone wants to, jump from this meeting directly there, just click the link in the chat, and you'll be there. The other thing is just the in the email that you got that directed you here to this meeting, that the link to where you can provide public input, say how many commission districts you prefer, and upload maps. That link is in that email. And of course, just email probably Desiree is best if you need any of those links resent to you.
Oh yeah, I can put my email in the chat, but it's just Desiree@icpj.org. And yeah, I'd love to hear, if y'all go to this meeting, I'd love to hear your thoughts and takeaways from the public hearing, and things moving forward as we go into the next meetings. So we have just a couple minutes before we want to jump, so we can make sure to get to the next meeting. Oh, hello. And so I don't know if anybody has any last questions before we go. Okay.
So why not 21?
There's been some pushback on anything above 11. The current commissioners are technically staying out of it, but also publicly stating that they like working with 9 people and that it's administrative kind of nightmare for them to go higher. So 21 might be interesting. You know, and even as an ask to try and get 15, right? If you ask for 21, but there, you know, that's just not, I don't think that's going to happen. And I do think 21 is unwieldy. I think, was Larry on a commission with 21 at one point?
Yeah, I think that he had talked about in Ingham County. And one of the things, so I think that is important is that we've heard over and over is this idea of getting things done. And so, you know, I think about like being in a group project, and it's like the more cooks in the kitchen, people feel like, oh, we can't get as much done. If there's fewer, that everything can sail through. And that is something that we're hearing people feel behaviorally, which is that the more commissioners, the less that can happen. And so, I mean, it's not a belief that I personally have, but that is something that I think is part of the pushback too.
They vote unanimously, right? I mean,
right, and that it's kind of engaging the public is sort of counter to a smaller commission, right? The larger it is, the more public engagement, and so that's why I'm for more districts. So within that agenda of getting things done is getting them done with less discussion, really. And that's not why, in my opinion, why people are elected to positions to, you know, push things through as quickly as they can. They need public input.
Yeah, thanks for that. Any last question? Well, just as folks are thinking, I just want to thank everyone for joining us for this flash session of why the County Commission matters. And I'm happy to see a lot of new faces on this Zoom. And so again, thanks for joining us. And we hope that be able to be kind of focusing on this more and more, because the next year, the County Commission will be going through a budget. They'll be setting a budget for the next 4 years. And so we will be keeping our attention on that process as well. And so I invite you all to stay connected with us for that too. Yeah. So I know we're gonna jump. Some of us will go and see each other in that next meeting. So we now have a couple of friendly faces to say hi to in that meeting. But even if this was just for information for you, thanks for coming, and share it with others too. So I'll say goodbye.
Thanks
Bye.
for putting it together, Des.
Thanks, Desiree.